welcome everybody to our event for today. It's coming of age in Germany and in the US. My name is Eva Baker. I'm the head of the language department at the Goethe-Institut in New York, and I'm very excited for today's event and guests. And with us today, we have award-winning German journalists, authors, Fatma Aydemir and Mohamed Amjahid, and also some students, Sofia Sepulveda Pizarro and Kavya Kadabageri. Hello. Fatma Aydemir is an author and journalist based in Berlin. She studied German literature and American studies in Frankfurt am Main. Her debut novel, Elbow, from 2017, was awarded with several literary prizes and is currently adapted as a movie. She co-edited the essay collection Eure Heimat ist unser Albtraum, Your Homeland is Our Nightmare. And her latest novel, Chins, came out this February, so congratulations for that. Mohamed Amjahid was born as the son of so-called guest workers in Frankfurt am Main in 1988. He studied political science in Berlin and Cairo. After completing his master's degrees, Amjahid worked for several big German newspapers. He is now a freelance investigative journalist, currently working on several new books projects. His latest book is Der weiße Fleck. Welcome. I'm really pleased that you could make it today. So we will have two parts today. The first part will be that Fatma and Mo will be in conversation with Sofia and Kavya, both from East Brunswick High School in New Jersey. And then also they will have a conversation with Jose Fernandez from Union Square Academy of Health and Science here in New York City. And they will discuss identity, belonging, and what it means to come of age in Germany and the US. Later, then we will go live into two German classrooms. First to Gap School, Sudbury Regional High School in Sudbury, Massachusetts, and then to East Brunswick High School here in New Jersey. You will also have the chance to ask your questions to the panel at the end of our event. But for now, just want to mention that this discussion is part of the events celebrating the 50th anniversary of the German-American partnership, GAP. And I will now hand over to Sofia, and I hope you can all enjoy the discussion.
Hi, hello, Fatma and Mo. Kavya and I are so excited to be speaking with you today. And without further ado, my first question is for Mo. You were chosen as a Thomas Mann Fellow, and you've had the chance to live right here in the US. Could you tell us a bit more about who Thomas Mann it was, and also what it means to be a Thomas Mann Fellow and what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy that we could exchange here, and it's very, very early here in LA, in the lovely Thomas Mann house. Unfortunately, you see only this curtain, but it's a bigger house that used to belong to the German writer Thomas Mann, a famous writer who fled during the Nazi era Germany and came here to Los Angeles, where there was a big exile community from Europe, actually. A lot of German Jewish authors and activists, opposition members of the opposition, they came here to Los Angeles to actually, first of all, save themselves from the terror and horror that the German Nazi system planned, and secondly, they worked from here from Los Angeles, especially Thomas Mann. Downstairs, I'm here upstairs in his master bedroom, and downstairs there's his old office, and he had, for example, a very famous radio show that was broadcasted through the BBC. That's like the British public broadcaster, telling Germans actually the truth about the Nazi regime and the Holocaust and the war, the Second World War. I'm sure all of you already spoke about this era in school, maybe you can tell us a little bit if you had the chance to discuss this in class. So for me, as an anti-fascist, anti-racist, queer feminist author and journalist, it's actually very inspiring to be here and to be able to sit at the same, it's not the same desk, but in his office and actually write my texts. So I am so happy and glad to be able to have this fellowship and work on my projects, because I think we need more critical views on contemporary German, but also American politics and discussions.
So our second question is for Fatma. Your first novel is called Elbow, and in it is a character named Hazel, who's a 17-year-old Turkish girl. And so we were wondering, why did you choose a young person to tell your story, and how has the experience of your family migrating from Turkey to Germany influenced your writing?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for this question, Kavya. Ellbogen, my first novel, was a coming of age story, basically. So I was interested in writing about a young person becoming an adult. Like in the novel, actually, the protagonist Hazal, it's her birthday. It's her 18th birthday. That's in Germany, it's the drinking and driving age, and it's a bit different to the US, 21. So by law, Hazal is fully adult and can suddenly, make her decisions on her own once she turns 18. But of course, in reality, it's not like you fall asleep, wake up the next day, and you feel like an adult and have other abilities, let's say, or are more confident in your decisions. So, but still, this person that I wrote about, had a lot of hopes for, like, she's really looking forward to be an adult, actually, because she feels very much, let's say, yeah, she feels, oh, I don't, sorry, I cannot think of the English word, but let's say, she thinks that once she's an adult, she's free to leave the house and make her own decisions, because her parents are always, interfering into her life. And for me, it was important because, Turkish parents, or let's say, Turkish parents in Germany, they're stricter than German parents, and also, which doesn't necessarily have to do with, like, their culture is so different, but also, a lot of immigrant parents are more cautious about the dangers outside for their children. So I want to express this feeling of isolation that I also had during when I was a teenager. And but the story in the novel then, like, I don't want to spoil the story. I hope it will be translated into English soon. But so something very terrible happens on the night of Hazar's 18th birthday, and really forces her actually to become an adult, like, overnight. And she has to start making her own decisions and be independent from her parents. So yeah, that's why I was interested in that age.
Thank you for sharing.
That's actually very interesting. And we have a follow-up question for you, Fatma. Well, I learned that you traveled to Turkey and spent some time there while you were writing Ellbogen. And did this experience of sort of reverse migration help to change or improve, or just transform your relationship with Turkey in any way? And if it did, could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting question. Actually, it did. I mean, I grew up in Germany and was born there. I'm the first child of my family who was born in Germany. And I mean, Turkish is my native language. I grew up with it. I grew up with Turkish TV. My parents were always, you know, having Turkish newspapers at home. So I always, it's not that I always grew up with like following what's going on in Turkey and, you know, knowing the language. So it was not like a country that's super far away from me. Also, I spent my summers there as a kid visiting my family. I have a lot of family there. But then spending there more time than just 2 weeks, but actually, you know, living there for a few months, getting to know people who I call my friends, and actually working there as an author and partly as a journalist as well, showed me the country in, you know, different ways. Also in a more uncomfortable way, I would say, because, you know, when you go somewhere for a holiday, you just have fun and then leave. But once you are staying there and interviewing people and, you know, trying to have a daily life by your own, you get to know different aspects of the country, a more realistic picture of the place. And also this reverse migration was important for me because this is also what happens to my protagonist in the book. So Hazal, after this terrible thing that I don't want to spoil happens in the book, she is going to Turkey. So she leaves Germany and lives in Turkey for the first time, or, you know, tries to live there. And she makes the experience that a lot of things that she, or a lot of ideas that she had of Turkey turn out to be untrue. And so it was kind of, yeah, it was interesting because I was trying to reflect my own experiences somehow on my protagonist as well, even though of course she's at a different stage in her life, much younger, and but still it was a very enriching experience for me.
So our next question is for Mo. So I learned that you lived in Morocco for part of your youth. And so we were wondering, how does that experience shape the way that you see both Germany and the United States?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Also, I know Fatma, but it's always very interesting for me just to listen again how experiences actually that you make while you are very, very young have an impact on your work later on. So, and therefore, novels like Ellbogen are telling us, compared to what we know in German literature, new stories and new perspectives and exciting actually plots. And for me, I try to make it very short. I'm born in Germany, in Frankfurt. And when I was 7, my parents, they decided that they want to go back to Morocco because they were so-called GastarbeiterInnen. That means that they were guests invited by the German government to work in Germany and make the German economy great again, if you wanna say it like that. But at one point, my parents, because of the tough life as Gastarbeiter, as workers in Germany, because of mistreatment, racism, bad food, actually, they just decided to go to Morocco and take me and my 2 sisters. I have 2 older sisters, and so I visited the school actually in Morocco till I finished school, and then I went back to Germany. And from today's perspective, I would say that had a big impact on my work and how I see the world. And my perspective as a journalist and as an author is definitively shaped by this biography of migration and migrating back and then migrating back. So it's like a little bit messed up, but at the same time gave me a lot of input. It was not easy, actually, because as a young person to change languages, countries, that's never easy, actually. But at the same time, I do speak a lot of languages, and I do think in a lot of how to say, from different perspectives. For example, when I make the research about foreign policy in Germany, and I know that it has an impact on other countries and other societies. So for me, going back from Morocco to Germany, and then actually since 2012, I came very often to the US also to work here as a journalist. It actually made me question some things differently compared to my, let's say, white colleagues who are always lived their very normal lives wherever they lived. So it's for me also, when I write my books, very important to reflect this perspective. Actually, I wrote my last book appeared a year ago. It's called Der Weiße Fleck. And I think, for example, that you experience as a person of color, not a person of color that grew up in another country, Germany, differently, for example. I didn't have, just a very simple thing, I didn't have for a long time the German citizenship. So I had to deal with the German administration in a way other people, they didn't have to deal with. So this actually shaped also the way I look at German society and politics, and also understanding issues around migration here in the US is, I think, different when you had that situation where you didn't know if you would get like another stay permit or not. So this is something that just made me maybe a little bit more critical towards how this world actually works. For some people very well, and for some people not so good.
Actually, thank you for your answer. It was very interesting. And you've also spoken about this idea that it is time to decolonize language. Could you tell us more about what this means, and also what makes you passionate about decolonizing language? And as a follow-up, do you think that this is approached differently here in the US than it is over like in Germany or perhaps other countries in the world?
Is that for me? Okay. So very important for me as an author is language reflects reality. And at the same time, the reality that we live in is also shaped by language. So it's very, very important, and thank you for that question, that we talk about how we speak, which words we use, to whom we listen. And for me, decolonizing language just means that no one in a certain society is overlooked and everybody is represented the way they feel it's right to be represented. So what happened in the last couple of decades, for example, or since 500 years, there was like this certain group of people deciding how we speak, what terms we use, how we name people, for example, and different minorities and groups. And decolonizing means, from my perspective, that we need to just listen to it's very easy at the same time. Just listen to different groups, ask them, have a conversation, and then adapt the language, which is not so much work. It's just like you need to be able to, as I said, listen. For example, when Black people say they would like to be addressed as Black people or Black community, just do it. There's no big deal around it. But some people, they don't like to change the way they talk, and that's a little bit sad at the same time, because we do not talk like in the 80s or in the 1800s, you know. Also now I'm like an old man, and I learn from younger people a lot when I'm here in the bus in LA sometimes, and it's full with younger people from high school, they use other words, and I'm like, okay, apparently nowadays you say this and this, so I need to look it up in the dictionary like an old man. But it's okay to have this fluid language and to rethink and reflect which terms, which expressions we use. And to your second question, I think that I often say that the conversation about language is further in the US compared to Germany. Maybe 10 to 15 years, I don't know, but it's very interesting that you had here in the US a conversation about how to make the language more inclusive. Meanwhile, in Germany, we still are struggling a little bit, and the best illustration is that we do use English terms when it comes to decolonizing the German language. We use, for example, people of color to address like non-white people. They like, which is interesting when you speak German or you write German and you say, in dieser Schule gibt es sehr viele people of color oder Schülerinnen of color, and you use the English terms that say something about the language itself and the conversation we still need to have, because it's not ideal at the same time. And it doesn't mean that when I, let me speak for myself, when I use a certain term that I say, this is right forever. I can imagine that I use in 3, 5, or 10 years something else than people of color. For example, I started to write in German schwarze Menschen and people of color, black people and people of color, to just be more distinguished and be more specific when I speak about a certain group. So I think we can actually learn, and this is also what I do here as a Thomas Mann Fellow, we can actually learn about the debates you have in the United States. Not saying that everything is cool and fine. I'm sure Kavya and Sofia, you can tell us a lot about how difficult it is also to have these conversations here, but we can learn a lot from in Germany from the conversation in the US.
Sorry, the school bell rang. Thank you so much for your answer. So the next question we have is for both of you, Fatma and Mo. So both of your works speak out about uncomfortable topics. With Fatma, your novel Elbow, focusing on growing up, migration, physical and language violence, and Mo, your work focusing on white privilege. So I was wondering what the general reaction from the public has been reading your work. If Fatma, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the reactions aren't always very mixed. So maybe the important part is to just say there are reactions. I mean, there are thousands of books coming out every year, so it's not a matter of fact that people will actually read my book and discuss it, and it will be, part of a wider debate. So I'm really grateful for having that visibility for my work. But yeah, the reactions are quite mixed, and I've noticed that because my new novel just came out, and a book was like 5 years ago, and they're two completely different novels, I have to say. Like the stories are so different, and they just deal with different topics. But I have the feeling that in the whenever a story, and I'm not just talking about the reactions to my book, but also to like books of other colleagues, authors, that as soon as a novel, a story is about a character who has an immigrant background, that comes from an immigrant family, the reactions will always be about how you deal with the topic of migration, like what is your political agenda? Is it, compatible with the readers or not? And it's never like not so much about, how is the writing, like what is the style like, and it's not that people don't know how to talk about the aesthetics of a novel. They do very well when, like, when the novel is about, let's say, white German experience. Then the conversation is about style. But as soon as, you know, you talk about lives that are for the mainstream audience more of like a marginalized sort of life or characters, it's I have the feeling that the reception or the reactions towards the books are always very much political. And I don't have a problem with like political discussions and debates, because I would also define myself as a political author. But I find it a bit like too one-sided, let's say. I would, because I also love just literature. I'm an author of literature too. So let's also talk about style. Let's talk about how, you know, I construct my plot, my stories, whatever, how, you know, how I work with different perspectives within the story and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say the reactions are very mixed, but what strikes me the most also with the new novel now is that the discussion or the debate on a novel quickly turns into a debate on migration in general, which is like the, you know, big topic of in Germany for the last longer, but like, let's say since 2015 it became like it has a new dimension and it really dominates everything. Whatever other problems we might have, it's always supposed to be like the big political topic. And I think it's a bit frustrating that it overshadows like everything I do.
As Fatma said, there are a lot of reactions to our work. And Fatma writes fiction when it comes to books. I write nonfiction. And for me, it's very, very important and interesting to just have a look to the feedback, because it gives me actually input to think about what can I offer more, where can I do the research, what is interesting actually for a wider audience. So like, let me start with the positive thing. I get a lot of, especially from younger people of color, racialized individuals, members of minorities. I get like a lot of amazing feedback, positive feedback, that they see that their reality is described when I speak, for example, about racism within the school system and do the research. So this is actually giving me also a lot of energy and a lot of, yeah, how to say it, and it empowers me when a person says, yeah, I am living this reality, and finally I have this book, or Fatma's Heimat book, for example, or other authors reflecting what I go through on a daily basis. And then there are the interesting readers who, first of all, I think often they even don't read what I write. It's that, you know, they just, there's this anecdote when I started to work for a regional newspaper in Berlin called Tagesspiegel. You know, maybe you also will have some internships soon, or you did already internships, and you have to do sometimes some interesting tasks. So on one of my first days, the newspaper asked me to write a text about the Easter Bunny. That was like just a man, and he would dress on Easter like a bunny, and you could rent him, and he would jump out from a big cake, you know, like very silly, or go and visit a kindergarten, for example. So it was like, okay, whatever. I wanted to be a political journalist, so I guess I need to write about the Easter Bunny. So I wrote about the Easter Bunny, and it was printed. And then I was so confused because the next day I had so many emails written by white older Germans, very offended, saying, how can that Mohammed touch our sacred Easter bunny? You know, they were like so offended, actually, also with racial slurs and stuff. I'm like, what is happening here? And I had to understand that for some people, it doesn't matter what I write or what Fatma writes, actually. There is a kind of a bias looking at us and our work, not even reading what we are offering, but criticizing it or going further. I don't want to reproduce all this racist language, but going further to say, to strip you from your role as an author and to say you have no actually right to exist actually in the first place as an author. So for me, it's interesting. It was interesting actually to understand that I cannot address everybody. I can only address those people who are willing to listen. And if I would have a wish, as an author, I would love to have critical readers who are taking my texts and actually criticizing them after reading, after doing the research. That would help me a lot, actually, because this is how you develop new ideas and how you actually maybe find mistakes or have a real conversation. But at the same time, I'm a journalist. I'm an investigative journalist. So what I do is like I go and I read data and I talk to whistleblower. And I, for example, when I write about police brutality, a big problem that you have here in the US, but also in Germany. And when a person doesn't pay attention to the research itself, it's not my opinion, actually, it's a research. So we need to have a conversation about, you know, that kind of structure that makes it possible that there is something like police brutality. When I see that a lot of people, they're like just offended by the fact that I'm offering this research, I'm like, okay, maybe I did something right. It's okay that they are offended. And it's actually for me a good sign that you are actually poking a little bit and trying to, yeah, open the discussion and the discourse so more and more new minorities, groups, voices can participate to change maybe the society for good.
Thank you so much, Mo, for that answer. Hopefully this insight can really be something incorporated into society in the future. But thank you so much to you, and Fatma, thank you so much for your answers too, and for taking the time to speak with us and be so open about your answers. So yeah, just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sofia and Kavya. These were really interesting questions, and we've already learned so much and got such a good insight. So thank you for your questions. We will now go into a classroom, a German classroom of Gap School, Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School in Sudbury, Massachusetts. And there is Sarah. Hello. Hi. Hello. Hi, everyone. Can you hear us? Yes, we can hear you. Good to see you as well. It's really exciting to have an insight into your classroom. So do you have a question for Fatma and Mo?
We do. I'm going to invite a student to come up and ask it.
Perfect.
Hey guys.
Hi.
So our question was, so right now we're learning a lot about civil courage and German history and the White Rose and all that stuff. So our question was was there any kind of relating to that? Was there any experiences when you guys were growing up in Germany that kind of represented some kind of discrimination? And then also like, how can we be kind of upstanders in our own society today and like today's racial climate?
Thank you. Yeah, Fatma, Mo, I don't know.
So if I may, and then maybe Fatma can add something. First of all, thank you for your questions. und guten Abend, or I don't know what time it is there where you are. It's very
Morgen.
nice to have guten Morgen. Oh yeah, you are closer to me. I'm in
Yeah,
LA.
yeah.
Whatever. I'm confused with the time zones. So actually, first, it's very interesting. I would be also very interested to learn more about how you look at German history. This actually, as an author, for me, super interesting, because in my last book, I have a chapter where I talk only about the reception of the German remembrance culture and how German history is actually thought in Germany and abroad. And as I said, I grew up partially in Germany, partially in Morocco. So I have actually the advantage that I didn't go to school in Germany. And some people are very confused and maybe also a little bit angry when I say the advantage. Maybe Fatma can then tell us a little bit more about being a non-white kid in a German school. I don't know about that, but it's for me it was like easier actually to go through my childhood and to visit school in Morocco where all the other kids just looked like me, for example. So when I came back to Germany, that was 2017. I don't know if 2007. I'm sure you don't remember that ancient time back then. So 2007, I came back to Germany, or went back to Germany to study, and I was very naive because I thought that there's nothing like racism, for example, or sexism or queerphobia in universities, because these people are educated. Why would they be mean to each other and racist, for example? And I had to learn it the hard way. And I described this in my first book, Unterweisen, how actually I was shocked by being confronted with all that racism, professors telling me, for example, that migration leads to more criminality without any evidence. They would just like say it like that, or other students not taking me serious, or other non-white students serious just because of a racist view that you are coming actually from the so-called third world and you are like not able to understand how the German system works, or to understand. Actually, I studied political science, and just as an example, someone told me in the German university I went to in Berlin that me coming from Morocco, I cannot talk about foreign policy because I'm from Africa actually, and so you cannot talk about African affairs because you're too emotional. I'm like, damn, I can tell you a lot of things that you even don't know that you don't know actually. So I'm very glad that as a younger person, I didn't have to go through this experience in school. And this is for me always very important to say that school environment should be a very inclusive environment where everybody just should have the chance to express themselves and not face any type of bullying or any type of racism or sexism, for example. And this is like the task, of course, of the school systems, of the teachers. But for me, actually, it made my life a little bit easier to not have that burden being in German school, because also German school system, I don't know if you know about that, but the German school system tries to determine when you are in the 5th grade what life you will have by distributing the kids to different school types, and you have in a lot of German cities or regions, unfortunately, the structure that non-white kids would go automatically to that school where they would not have the chance to go to university, for example, because the system says, okay, if your parents are guest workers or were guest workers, or your grandparents, you should stay on that, lifestyle, and you should become this or this when you grow up, which doesn't mean that it's, I don't want to sound classist. It's very important to talk about the right of a lot of workers, but at the same time, kids should be able to choose whatever they want to do. I mean, you can be a pilot or a nurse or whatever you want, but you have to have that chance to say what you want, actually. And the German school system actually prevents a lot of kids to choose, and that's wrong. And I didn't have to go through this experience. Therefore, I'm very, very glad, actually.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, then we will go to our other school, and we will go into East Brunswick High School in East Brunswick, New Jersey. We see, and we lost Fatma, I believe, maybe. And we also lost the other school, but maybe we had some other questions from earlier on, Sofia and Kavya. We can continue with one of the questions because, oh, Fatma is there. Ah, yeah. I just can't see Fatma at the moment, but she's here. Okay, that's great. And there's also Silke. Hallo, Silke.
Hallo, und hier ist unsere Schule.
Hallo.
Hello.
Hallo. Hello.
Hi. And yeah, we have Kenneth. Fatma, yes. There you are. Kenneth, okay, Kenneth Chan will be asking questions from East Brunswick High School. Hi, Kenneth.
Hi. Hi, so our first question is for Mo. So you spent a lot of time in America as a Thomas Mann Fellow, and during that time, there's been a lot of civil discourse over race. So what do you like about America's civil discourse over race, and what do you think Germany can learn from America in this regard?
Could you understand the question? Was that?
Yeah, most of it actually. It was directed at me, right?
Yeah, Mo. Yeah.
Okay. So in general, first, before I talk about the discourse itself, that is for me also an author very interesting. The amazing thing in the US is that everybody is willing to talk to me. You know, I would just go and ask a half a question if someone would like to make an interview, or if I can make an interview, and people in the US would like, yes, I will tell you my whole story. Yay. You know, it's a little bit different now with the pandemic, but compared to Germany, I think a lot of people in the US are more open to tell their own story, which is amazing and just very convenient for me as a journalist. So yeah, thank you guys for that, just for being so open and talking about your experiences. And at the same time, it's very important. So what I do actually is try to come to the US, talk to a lot of people, read a lot of books, and try to translate that knowledge to a German framework or German discussion. My book, Der Weiße Fleck, I was early 2020, before the pandemic hit. I was in Philadelphia for 2 months, and I spent these 2 months in the library of the Temple University there, on the 4th floor, where you had like the whole floor just with amazing books, theory books, queer feminist theory, anti-racist books that you would never find in this sort actually in Germany. So there you can see that there is a bigger conversation. That doesn't mean that you can copy paste actually everything that is happening in the US to Germany, or the conversation itself. Because Germany, we have like, of course, like stuff is connected. Some Germans, they say, okay, they have like discussions about racism that we don't need to deal with. And my answer is like, do you think white people in the US, they fell from the moon or whatever? They came actually from somewhere, from Germany, for example, or from other European countries. And so there is a connection actually in the stories, the biographies, the migration history. But at the same time, what I try to do, and I think what other authors also try to do, is to enable as a German perspective and a German conversation about police brutality, discrimination in schools and universities, about intersectional discrimination, when you talk about different categories, for example, as I said, racism, sexism, queerphobia. So the good thing in the US is that you had a deeper conversation when it comes to anti-racist perspectives, especially from a Black perspective, where we can, as non-Black people, learn a lot from it, from the way how to dismantle a system that is working in favor of white supremacy. Just an example, the prison industrial complex, for example, that is built actually to put people, non-white people, especially Black people, but also a lot of Latinx people, into a system that is designed to make a lot of money for certain companies. So just by reading all these texts and all the theory about this specific example, I learn a lot that I can take back to Germany and apply there. For a certain German framework, we do not have the same prison complex, for example, in Germany, but we have similar discourses where you have in certain cities a lot of decision makers trying to put as many non-white, in this case brown folks, in prisons, saying this is the only solution that you can have. And then they would complain about, you know, that people are not integrated. And the question is, if we can have an utopian other idea how we would like to live together and how we would like to organize things like security, like prosperity, education. So this is why, for me, it's always very, very interesting to be here in the US and talk to so many activists, authors, artists, and learn from their perspective and try to apply it to the German situation.
So our second question is for Fatma. So what cultural changes would you like to see in Germany that would help Germans in general accept those with migrant backgrounds?
Thank you. Wow, that's a very difficult question. What cultural changes? I think, yeah, I like the question because we need some cultural changes here. And I guess, I think the main change that needs to happen is that people here, I mean, not all of them, but a lot of people in Germany, also a lot of people who are in decision positions, need to stop holding on to the idea of a nation state that is free of immigrants, or somehow, you know, where immigrants are not as visible, let's say, because this is like, this never existed. Like I cannot even say it's outdated because it hasn't existed in you know, in history, and it will never exist. And holding on to that idea is somehow, I don't know, it's genocidal somehow. Like how would you get rid of immigrants? Like why would you imagine a country that is doing better without migration? So I think this is something that people need to stop thinking, and also to understand what this sort of idea or imagination, what kind of consequences it has, and what kind of fears it's leading to within an immigrant community. Mo just also talked about it briefly because his family also came as labor migrants to Germany. My grandparents immigrated also as labor migrants to Germany. So what they did was after World War II, when the economy needed new labor because there were not enough men who wanted to do that sort of work. I guess you learned about it in German class, but just briefly, they brought people from other countries, from the global south, from southern Europe, from Turkey and Morocco, to do that dirty work in the factories, and it worked very well. The German economy is an economy that the whole world looked up to at some point. And then when they didn't need these people anymore, the Germans started complaining how to get rid of them, and this is not how it works. And I just wanted to summarize it quickly because I think this is the pattern that keeps on repeating all the time. Also with the refugees that have been coming in the last years, that they are always being seen as some sort of problem people that are trying to take away something from us, but actually they're just cheap labor doing the work that nobody else wants to do. Also in Germany, so Germany really profits a lot from migration and from refugees, and it's a very sad way to look at it, but that's the reality of it, and still they're complaining. So I think there needs to be a change in this sort of thinking.
Thank you, and thank you, Kenneth, for your questions, and also thank you to the whole school, East Brunswick High School in East Brunswick, New Jersey. Thank you. And now we come to our third student that we have here with us today, Jose Fernandez of Union Square Academy of Health. And Jose will also have some questions ready for you. In the meantime, if you have any questions, we might have a few minutes in the end and we can answer questions. If you have any questions to the panelists, you can just put them in the FNQ. Jose, hello.
Hello. All right, I want to ask a simple question to Fatma. I know you've won the Michael Cooney Award, my fault for my pronunciation, but what are future projects that you are planning to do, and where do you see yourself in 20 years?
Where do I see myself in 20 years? Wow, good question. I don't know. I see myself still writing novels, being a bit more relaxed about it. You also asked about my future project or the next project I'm working on. I just published the novel, so right now I'm just giving interviews and stuff and enjoying having accomplished it, to be honest. So I don't have any future plans, but in 20 years I want to be still writing novels and fiction, and being a lot more relaxed about it and not stressing myself so much about about life in general. I hope I will be a very relaxed older person, and I hope that I will be giving interviews, and in these interviews I hope I will not be getting asked about whether Muslim families are really oppressive towards women or not, because all families are oppressive towards women. That's literally the definition of a family. And I hope this sort of exercising questions will just be super embarrassing to everyone in 20 years and not only to some people. And And I want to have a little dog. That's how I see myself in 20 years.
Okay. Question for Mo now. In the face of rising polarization in the United States and xenophobia in Europe, if you were to think forward to the future, what could both sides of the political spectrum work together to improve race relations in the United States and in Europe?
Yeah, thank you, Jose, for that question. Actually, very important for me is to state that anti-fascism is nothing progressive or just for the left. You can actually be conservative and anti-fascist at the same time. That's very, very important because, there's this tale that Antifa, they're like, some lefty anarchist group. And of course, there are lefty anarchist groups, but to be anti-racist, to be anti-sexist, for example, or anti-fascist in general, you can actually be in a conservative party or member in a conservative party or vote for a conservative party and say that you don't want Black people to be killed by police. It goes very well together, actually. You can advocate, I don't know, for cheap gas prices and at the same time say that school system has to be free from any discrimination. It's nothing that, AUC just has as a copyright. It's okay to emphasize that this is something that you can have actually in the mainstream of the political spectrum. Having said that, it's very important to also draw some red lines, I think. You have in the US a political system that works with only two parties, with the Republicans and the Democrats. And of course, you have like the parties themselves, they are very complicated. They're like not one homogeneous entity. And in Germany, we have many parties. But if there is a political force, let's say, and their agenda actually is racism, more or less, then I don't want to talk to them. I don't take them serious. It's not okay to have a coalition with them. It's not okay to vote for them, actually. It's not okay to talk to them because someone in Germany, for example, a party that is saying that they would like to shoot at refugees at the borders of Europe, it's like, what can I talk? What would be the compromise if I sit down and I would like say, okay, let's have a conversation, let's talk this out. What would be the compromise? Or let's make it more personal. If someone from in this example, more the right wing spectrum says that I shouldn't exist or Fatma shouldn't exist in Germany in the first place. Or someone in the US would say, I don't like people like Jose, Kavya, or Sofia in the US. What would you discuss with this person? That you leave for 6 months and that you stay for 6 months? Or what is the solution there? So it's important, I think, to have a very clear stand on human rights and empowerment of different communities, especially those who are racialized, and to say that I am willing to talk everything through and willing to have a conversation, but I cannot just open the floor for everybody. So this is why for me it's so important to distinguish actually with whom in the first place I can talk and with whom I cannot have a conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose, for your questions. I think we have a bit more time to have a question from the audience. And Dennis Sertkol-Bergner asked, what can you learn from your parents and what from the younger generation? Fatma, maybe you can answer this first.
What we can learn from our parents and from
your parents and from the younger generation. Yeah.
I think from my parents, I can learn to be more let's say, I don't want to say stronger, but like to be a bit more resistant against stressful things, and not to complain too much. I know it really sounds like it's quite like the opposite of a lot of things that we've said today. But I don't know. I think it's important to have to just like keep in mind that dealing with these issues is very, very important. But at the same time, to draw a line where this like dealing with subjects like racism turns into a sort of a distraction from other things you want to be doing. So that's, I guess, what I can learn from my parents, not getting distracted by everything. And from the younger generation, I think a different sort of self-confidence that I didn't have when I was a younger person, a teenager or a young adult. I have this feeling that younger generation is much more comfortable with expressing themselves and their views on what's going on around them, politics, society, the world. That's what I can learn from them, to be more confident in what I say and think. Yeah.
Thank you. And Mo?
I have to be very cautious, because if my mom hears that I'm learning something, she would go nuts and send me sassy gifs on WhatsApp. But first of all, what I try not to do like my parents, if I can begin with that. What Fatma also mentioned is my father always told me, my father died, but he always told me that I should be nice to white people because they're our bosses. He came as a labor migrant, and he always had this German boss yelling at him, and he would just be very patient about it and say, yes, sure, I will do it in a different way. So I think when I was young, I was like, this is not right, actually. I respect you, but I think it's if someone does something bad or it's an injustice, you have to speak up for yourself. Why are you so patient, actually? So this is why maybe I became this party pooper, naggy author, and always telling Germans that they should change whatever. So this is something I would say is always in my mind. But at the same time, what I learned from my parents or the generation of our parents or grandparents, especially those who migrated to Germany, is the resilience, actually, and the energy and how much power they had, and how much, as Fatma also mentioned, it's they are aware of the dangers out there, and they just want to protect their children. We all know, and I'm so sure, parents can be so annoying sometimes, but often they just want to protect their children and teach them actually how to be resilient. That's the same thing, I think, for a lot of teachers. This is why I have tremendous respect towards teachers, because it's a very, very tough job, actually, to it's not only about learning lessons or history or math or something, but it's also learning for life and actually preparing younger people to go out there and hopefully fulfill their dreams and whatever they want to do. So this resilience and this strength and this power is something very inspiring for me when I have a look to how our parents and grandparents actually survived. And it's, I think, the right term to use, survived in Germany, because they came to Germany and they were mistreated in a way that is like very inhuman. So I have so much respect, and I think that we didn't hear yet about all those stories. This is why I was so excited when I read Fatma's new novel, Jinns, because it also has exactly this kind of storytelling that we need to listen more to our parents and grandparents, and that these kind of stories are not yet told so often by the people who experience this very difficult times in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So this is why I'm so excited to have people like Fatma out there. And the second part of the question was like younger people, right? What we can learn from younger people.
Exactly, yeah.
So actually, what I'm like in my readings, I have sometimes very young people sitting there, and young people, usually they write me via Instagram. And the thing I observed is how open the younger generation is to new input, how willing a lot of young people, not all of them, but a lot of young people, how open they are to listen to new perspectives and how curious they are. Yeah, like, you know, we old people, we make fun, you're only on TikTok and stuff. But at the same time, I have the feeling that there is a certain change actually within younger generation to be willing to just read up, to just inform yourself, and then have an opinion about something. Of course, it's not always easy because life is so, you know, everything is so fast, and with the pandemic, everybody had to stay home and exchanges became very difficult. But at the same time, if I see, sometimes I would have a young person, 18, 19 years old in the audience, and they would ask like today, they would ask so brilliant questions where I have to think about, you know, where I get a lot of input. So for me, this openness, I think, is a deal breaker, and gives me a lot of hope that we can actually have something changed in the upcoming generations, changed for good.
Yeah, yeah. And I think these are really nice words to end our event today. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time left, but thank you everybody so much for participating in this. It's been so great. And I think it showed how important it is to have these conversations and to have these events that enlighten what the thoughts are, and also transatlantic exchanges as well. So thank you very much to everyone, and thank you everybody for the audience for your great questions, and the German classes as well, which was really nice to see. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Have
a good day, all of you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's been amazing.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.